I'll
Yeah,
just follow your lead.
it's totally fine. I'm really, really good with, improvisation. So
Yeah, and we are totally looking forward to, I think, whatever flows. The main thing is just, I think, to, uh, we know, and you're just the pro at natural, and just Molly to just flow from the heart. And I think we are just here to be surprised.
thank you. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Heart Song.
Thank you. So we'll just maybe sit in silence for a few minutes before we begin. Welcome, everyone. What a joy to be here together. It's a real delight. My name is Audrey, and I'm super excited to co-host today's special heart session, Heart Talk with Molly. Thank you for joining us from wherever you happen to be in the world. We're really grateful for your presence in co-creating the collective energy of this conversation. So in today's call, we'll hear a talk from Molly, and then we will have that followed by a moderated interview, which Janet will lead, and then go into a space where we'll have Q&A from anybody who would like to ask a question. So first, let's begin with a minute of silence just to anchor ourselves in this space together. Thank you. Welcome again, everybody, to a special Heart Talk with Molly Sturgis. As you may know, this call was actually born out of welcome again. As you may know, this call was actually born out of a Living and Dying pod that recently completed. It was an online learning journey that delved into the head, hands, and heart, into death and dying, and losing and loving, and living, and a lot more in between. So there are about 130 people around the world from a couple different countries, a couple dozen different countries, that engaged really deeply with each other. And then we had a series of follow-up bonus conversations and emergent themes that flowed from there. And so one such conversation is turned out to be stories from Molly. And as we were going through our pod, we realized Molly had so many up close and personal experiences with sitting with people at the end of their lives, and bringing to life through music the beauty of their lives. So we wanted to have a little heart talk session. And originally we thought it would just be a few of us after this pod, a few pod alumni joining together and like a fireside chat, having a conversation with Molly. But then as we uncovered more of Molly's journey, we realized it would be selfish to keep this to the pod only. So we've opened it up. And so whether you're live streaming on the call through the Awaken Talks platform, or if you're a pod alumnus holding space in the Zoom call here, we're really grateful to be sharing this space together. Thank you for joining and co-creating it with your presence, and holding the space across airwaves wherever you are. So today, the format of our call will be first a heart talk from Molly, and then around how she learned love through serving the dying, and through many other facets of life. And following that, our moderator, Janet Hartson, will engage a lively dialogue with Molly. And then in the last third of our 90-minute call, we'll have space for people who would like to ask a question, to share a question. So at any point during this call, if you would like to ask a question, you can submit it. If you're live streaming, you can submit a question through the live stream form. And for our pod alumni here who are with us on Zoom, you can simply send your question in the chat message to our Zoom tech volunteer, who today is Rohit, and that will get into the queue to ask a question. So, all right, let's begin. I'll pass the mic to our moderator, Janet, who herself is a remarkable nurturer of so many journeys. And one of the things Janet does is, for the past decade or so, she's been part of a chorus that sings to those in hospice, and just kind of providing a bit of solace and reflection to those at the end of their lives. So Janet, thank you for being our moderator today. We are grateful that you're here too. Over to you.
Thank you, Audrey. And thank you for everyone for circling up for today's special Heart Talk with Molly. This is called Heart Talk, and it's so appropriate to have that name because Molly has turned her community projects into intimate communication from the heart. Whether it's reflecting her environmental activism or all the way up to her current project, Stories That Heal, they all feel like personal conversations, but on a global scale. That to me is miraculous. Just as Surface Space does, she invites the collective wisdom of the group she works with to co-create these masterpieces. Imagine the foresight and patience that takes. Molly has spent decades sitting with elders or people who are dying and helping them compose a last song expression of a core message from their lives. She's a healing-centered composer, artistic director, meditation teacher, mother, and educator who has served as faculty at George Washington University, the University of New Mexico, and nurtured so many creative collaborations that touch on strands of humanity. She's the founder of Little Globe, a nonprofit that unleashes the healing spark of creativity music, and the arts in a way that builds intergenerational community and transforms systems. Her remarkable work in the world is also a reflection of the powerful inner journey she has traversed, including multiple encounters at the brink of death. Thank you for being here today, Molly.
Gosh, Janet, thank you so much. I've never had an introduction like that. I'm so grateful. I think for many of us doing this kind of work, it's a little bit like, groping around in the dark. Like I think probably a lot of people on here can relate to it. But thank you so much, Janet, for such a beautiful introduction. And there's so much I want to say about service space, but I'm going to hold off because we have a short time. But just to say thank you to everyone. It's such a profoundly deep community in the realist sense. And so I'm really glad to see my pod mates here. You all could be giving a heart talk, and I'll be looking forward to being at yours. And to all the people on Zoom as well that I cannot see, welcome. And I just would like to just start, as always, to just set my intention, because as you'll hear, my experiences, we're all, the world is energy and we are energy, and I really, really feel strongly that just grounding and having that time. So I just would like to set my intention that my words and actions help to heal the wounds of the past, the now, and the future, and to help support in lifting the shared heart that has deep wisdom, knowing, that knows how to navigate from wholeness, and to support the true making of a web of healing and knowledge, of wisdom and of love that always exists. And so it is. Thank you all. So we're going to get started today, and I really like to ground everything in stories. And as you can imagine, doing this work for about 28 years at the intersections of spirituality and community organizing and music, there's a lot of stories. I've been in a lot of places. And I'm going to start with, it was hard to choose, and Audrey was so helpful in just helping me think of a structure, and Janet and Heart Song. And so I just want to start with life songs. And those of us in the Living and Dying pod, which I cannot recommend more for everybody on this anywhere in the world, is a program that got started out of a project I did in Ireland called Moment. And out of that came a community opera project in Santa Fe, and being made with community members. And I was very aware from working with elders over long periods of time, having started when I was young, that there are many people who could not participate. I've always been very focused on how do we make meaningful venues for participation. And as many of us know, that involves everything from transportation to food to when it happens to who does it to where it happens. And so part of this work is for sure, Janet mentioned the patience that goes into the work. Sometimes with these projects that I'm going to talk about, we think of the project as like just the song or the concert. No, it's everything. It's everything. It's every conversation. It's how I'm being with a partner about the pizza that's going to be delivered, or the funder that's grumpy with me, or a person. It's all of it. That is all music. It really is. And so, I think maybe many of us here share that perspective, but I've definitely seen it on the ground. And so I'll start with these stories, with life songs, and then we'll wind into another part of the talk, which is really looking at the creative process. But within each of that is the thing of, how did I learn to love? Well, it's all that. Every bit of this is that. And I would say it's a bit more of like how to be love, like how to get used to being loved. That's what I might call it, is like, how in the heck do I get used to being loved? And I think a lot about static. So through these stories, I'll talk a little bit about that, of like the systematic inequities, that the traumas, the way that plays out in terms of belief systems, working in these environments where people feel very diminished, and just finding ways to work where the life force comes forward, and the connective tissue, the living force comes forward. And that's really all these stories are. So here we go. Life songs. For the people in the pod, I started talking about this project, and I gave you a little bit of the history, and it really was and is writing music with people who are in hospice or care centers. And all this work is intergenerational. And with Life Songs, what we did was the young people sang the songs, not only just youngs. Sometimes there were threshold choirs, all you threshold singers out there. Sometimes there were community members. Sometimes there were many more people on stage for the community events than were in the audience. So you have to question that. Like, we're using a form that's familiar called a concert, but what we're doing are community rituals, right? And rituals can be a bit of a triggering word for some people, but I take my cues from the way humans have always done healing rituals and gatherings and practices, where communities come together and the arts are integrated into that. Many Indigenous communities do that, keep that alive well. So that's really part of this, even though what I'm going to be talking about happens within arts institutions sometimes. So the first person, Barbara, I mentioned on the living call, and this is Francisco. That's fine. We can see Francisco. Here's some pictures of Life Songs. So yeah, that's great. Okay, so just a bit about Life Songs. We worked with people in care centers and hospice. This is Francisco Romero, one of my heroes, and there's a song on my website called Dancing by Moonlight, and he was a great romantic and stayed alive for a concert, really held on because he wanted to dance with a nurse's aide in the concert, because he said it reminded him of his first dance with his wife. So you can go to the next one. So this is us. This is very often what Life Songs look like in many of my projects. So you can see that we're in a circle. We almost always go one circle at a time. There's time to connect. There's time to listen. There's time to create. Next one. And in all of this, what I find is that the arts make beautiful music and the arts, contemplative time just lifts the connective tissue that's already there. And I feel that music helps make the world intimate, and that is no small thing. And so this is also a very common image from many of the projects in Life Songs. Next one. Yeah, so this is a good example of like what my crew looked like for many years. So, we would go in here. This was a part of Life Songs where we were making instruments so people could actually compose things. And I'll be talking about the power of agency and voice and choice within this kind of work and how that relates to healing trauma. But this is a great example of a Life Songs ensemble session. Yeah, next one. And this is an example of the concerts. Yeah, you can see how many people are there. And the song that's happening, they're singing, I'm feeling wonderful tonight. That's what they're singing right there. And that's a beautiful thing to have all these people of different generations lifting a sense of beauty and joy. And it's really important right now, I think, especially, but it's been important over all these many years, not in any kind of fake way or tokenizing way. I think that's really important to say. All of this work has been built on a process of back and forth, of co-creation and collaboration. And the next one, I think, is Bob, maybe. Yeah, good. So I want to play you a little bit of a song, and then we'll move on a little bit more quickly. Bob Wyatt was somebody I worked with. I'm sitting there with my guitar and singing with a hospice nurse. So many times we have in this work, it's a lot about bringing people together from many different sectors. And the beautiful thing about Bob, one of the things, the main lessons I wanted to share about Bob, as you'll hear in this, a little bit of this song, grew up in New Mexico. He knew about 250 country western songs. I met him on hospice, and we started playing together. I'd never played country or western or country western music before. Bob was my guy. And what I want to say about this is what Bob taught me very, very deeply was the importance and the generosity of being our unique selves. Bob had a very unique life. And in this work, I think so often we think it is us that is giving. And I know most people on this call just know, like, the amount that I have been given in this work, blessed each time. And part of it has to do with having the space and the time to feel safe together, comfortable together, to get to know each other, to build a real relationship. And the music really opens that up. And Bob wanted to write a song, as I told Audrey the other day, and Janet and a few others. He loved, do you guys remember, anybody out there remember Mel Torme? He was a crooner, like he was before my time actually, but Bob really liked him, but he was like, Molly, I just want to be called Mel Torme was called the Velvet Fog because his voice was so velvety, but Bob wanted his song to be called the Velcro Frog. And so that's what it was. So let's just play a little bit of Bob's song. And you'll see this is, he's a sassy guy. So here we go. Okay, thank you, Audrey. I'll go much faster. Thank you. Riding around in my pickup truck, listening to the radio, just a young punk, a Taos boy who found himself in Roswell town. There at the Christian dance, Edna was. Soon it would become sweet love. Together we'd drive around singing cowboy songs. Now I couldn't dance to save my life, but Edna taught me well, then became my wife. And with her help, I found my dancing shoes. From Lefty Frizzell to Patsy Cline, Williams, Christopherson, Nelson, and Prime, singing those songs, well, it got me through. Well, I've tried hard just to be like them, but in the end, I'm just the man I am. When I reach Peter at the pearly gates, I'll tell him there was no need to wait, 'cause this old boy is going down, down, down to the Rio Grande. Down, down, down to the Rio Grande. I wanna sit by the river. So I hope you enjoyed that. Bob Wyatt, everybody. Unique man, blessed me with his deep, unique spirit. And part of this work for sure is trying to make pathways so that people feel comfortable participating in ways that feel authentic to them and real to them. And each one of you out there has a life songs too, you know, and sometimes it starts like, oh, I know what I'm going to write my life songs about. And you start somewhere and boy, it doesn't stay there. I'm just saying, like it might go somewhere else. We've had all different kinds. So I want to go ahead and I'm going to skip over Rohit and Audrey. I'm going to skip over Fire Rock for right now because we're just a little short on time. I know these stories take often a little bit more time. We can come back to it later if we want, but I'll just mention it. For 9 years, worked on a climate crisis project. And in some ways, I think it's really was about the emotional health of our communities and building capacity. But the reason I included in Working with the Dying is because it was so much about spaces of grief and overwhelm, and very, 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 very similar to working with hospice to me. And so that's a project that, you know, anybody can write me about and we can talk more about. But one of the big takeaways there was the profound act of turning towards discomfort in all this work. And how to create spaces where people feel comfortable but not overwhelmed, to feel all the feelings. And how do we change narratives from, how do we identify the stories that we're living by that are not serving us? I mean, so many of us are involved in that right now. And what are the life-affirming narratives and the stories that are in our bodies, that are alive between us? And the music helps to lift that. The stories help to lift that. I've seen it over and over again. So I'm going to skip Fire Rock and I'm going to end with a bit more about stories that heal. So Rohit, if it's okay, if we can pull up just the image from Stories That Heal. And so I'm in northern Michigan. You can see I'm in a music room right now. I'm in a place called Interlochen, and I'm up here for 2 months doing a project called Stories That Heal, which is an outgrowth of all these projects. And right after this call ends, a woman's going to walk in this building named Emily. Emily's young, and she has 2 kids, and her husband struggled with addiction for many years, very young. And this is a county up here that has a lot of generational poverty and a lot of suicide. And excuse me for that sound, everybody, just one sec. Okay. A lot of suicide. And what happened with Emily is that her young husband had been dealing with addiction and conquered it, and then just had a relapse a few months ago. And so she is taking her grief, as many do, and turning it into fuel to make heartfelt change in the world. And so the song you're about to hear is a draft, and it's a very, very good example of what collaborative music writing looks like. My job is to find the way for her to participate and collaborate that works for her and is meaningful. And that's what I try to do. And so you're going to hear that with Emily. She's going to walk in here, and the amazing thing about Emily is she's singing it herself. And so at the community event and concert on the 15th, she will be standing and singing the song you're about to hear. It is very, very touching. So I think, what did I learn from Emily, or what am I learning? I'm learning so much. But one of the things is, if we can make meaning out of suffering, like, that's fabulous. And we can do so much. There's so much resource when we're able to do that. So much. So if we could just hear a little bit of Emily's song. And this is called All the Love You Gave. And we just finished this or so.
Oh, is there a password to this? No? Oh, okay, we're good. You good? Every time I get in the car, I call you. I still got a lot I want to say.
time I looked in your eyes, I never wondered how much life that we were gonna make. Your smile made everyone feel welcome. On paper, you had the perfect life. I know you didn't mean to leave us, but you couldn't overcome the hurt inside. I will take all the tears you left me. I will leave the world a better place. I will take all the love you gave me. Hold our children close and keep them safe. Keep them safe. Keep them safe. Yeah, so can you feel that? Can you feel that? So maybe just beam a little love towards Emily today. She's about to walk in here, and yeah, so I just want to say one of the things I mentioned in the pod was, you know, we have 1 in 5 teenagers having suicidal ideation right now. So it's a different kind of death and dying work. And in this work, what I've learned is to lean in towards, there's only so much I can do. I used to think I could do so much. I mean, it was just ridiculous, you know, and I burnt myself out. And I'll tell you about all that, as many of us have, really burnt out bad. But there is our little part, and I got my little part. And, you know, I think what's happening with our teens is a different kind. Thank you, Audrey. So of death and dying work, really, in some ways. And so I just want to give a shout out to that. Working on I'll share something during question answers about that. So the last thing I just want to say, there's just a few other quick things, and I'll probably just go 2 minutes over, Janet. One is that I did, you know, Audrey referred to this. So when I had my daughter, I did have a dying experience. You know, it's hard and awkward to talk about pain and illness, partly because there's just still a lot of stigma. I'm like, oh, I should be healthier or something, you know. But for those of us who have been through chronic pain or critical chronic illnesses, it's a deep journey, and it's one I'm actually quite thankful for in a certain way, because I have learned a lot, and I have much more empathy. But I was a yoga teacher and, you know, all this stuff, and a vegetarian, but boy, did I get sick, really, really sick. So I had a dying experience when I had my daughter and lost over half my blood. So that has factored significantly into this work, but in a different way than most people, I think, sometimes think about near-death experience. I had already been that young little mystic, but not really fully embodied in this earth in a certain way. And once I had my daughter, I was able to, I was very enamored with transcendence before that, and then I started to understand much more what embodied love really feels like. And thank you. And that journey, like many of us have been on, is challenging and deeply valuable, but that has been a lot more of where I've been focused. And though I've been figuring out ways to calm our collective nervous system in some ways through this work, in some ways I hadn't taken full responsibility internally. I had inner spaciousness. I knew how to meditate. I knew how to work with reactivity, but I did not really, in some ways, know how to make a good boundary. And I think all the empaths on the call will understand that. It's like, I'm everything, right? Like all the time. Well, that doesn't always work that well. You know, I've learned that I have to be skillful along a range. And part of that is this being in this body. And so, yeah, I had a rare cancer, part of my neck and tongue taken out. I was, a vocalist. I stopped singing, which is super ironic given my projects. So I'd be like, yes, everybody, let's sing, except me. I'm not singing. They're like, what? So, these amazing opportunities. So I want to just say integration has been such a big part of it, and just learning to let go. Every step of the way has been learning to let go so I could be more present. Learning to let go to be more present, and all of that just working together. So the last thing I want to do is just scroll really quickly through these pictures, and I'm just going to give you sound bites about some things I've learned. So if we can just do the creative process ones, and then I'm going to end. So Rohit, the first one. Okay, guys, this is just sound bites. The power of beauty and this language of the soul. I love creative expression because it just opens up so much. And particularly spaces, a little bit like service space, where you set the conditions, but then there's a lot of space for the emergent to happen. The second one, please. Okay, great. This is Moment in a homeless shelter in Ireland, a project for the EU Festival of Culture. This is Michael. Spent his lifetime in institutions. We all need meaningful participation. We know it with climate crisis. We know it with youth work. We know it with intergenerational work. We know it, so many of us feel it. I went through it during COVID. I got super depressed. We all need ways to participate meaningfully and to be felt and seen and heard, and beautiful things happen. Next one, please. I call this slide voice and choice. In trauma education, you hear these words, voice and choice, of how that creates a sense of agency and safety, where we can, again, work with the trauma and feel our resource in that. And so this was a community opera in Santa Fe, but the importance, I never knew, I work a lot with systematic inequities in this work as fundamental. Having a beautiful stage for community members, a place of kind of power in a dominant sense, goes a long way in terms of being witnessed. So while I've done projects everywhere, in parks and nursing homes and church basements, many, also being on stage and lifting the expressions as beautifully, as powerfully as I can has been important. Next one. The power of curiosity. We talk about the inner approach of curiosity, of tenderness, of open inquiry, and just what that brings as opposed to needing answers. And really, that's what happens in these spaces, is like, oh my God, surprise, like, who knew? Virginia right there was one of the most sophisticated artists I have ever worked with. I think she had like 6 kids. Many of them died from drug overdose. She lived in a town called Espanola, where it's rough, hard. And she lived in a nursing home for many years. She had a stroke early. Incredible woman in terms of opening space with us all. Next one, please. I just have 4 more. And I mentioned this, the power of the compassionate witness, the power of showing up and just being like, I'm with you, we're doing this, I'm paying attention. And I find that culture of having activated space of witnessing and listening creates healing immediately. Next one, please. Courage. This is my arts and social healing class at George Washington University, right across the street from the White House, by the way, which was really surprising. The courage to walk out into the world. We were putting up a project in Lafayette Square across from the White House called the Soul Soothing Station for the United States of America when COVID hit. We couldn't do it, but this team was ready to go. We were going to be in a tent every day for a month. So creative courage, it really heals so much, and I've seen so much of it. Next one, please. The power of magic, of colors, of whimsy, of the imagination. When we can move the imagination, when we let ourselves imagine, we become creators and co-creators of our world. And then the future, the negative future, or the toxic future ideas gets to move aside. That static gets to move aside as we become creators and co-creators. So that's always something I'm looking for in this work. And I'm just going to end with this one. This is a picture of the Soul Soothing Station in a certain way. And you can see Hadrian there on the tent is going, how might I bring more joy? And the flag says, love, serve, heal, and protect. And to end with, I just made the move as a community carer of somebody who's doing this kind of soul musical chaplaincy work, I call it. You know, we know how to love. We all know how to heal. We all know how to protect what's sacred. So that's what I'm holding space for. And I've learned to just be gravitational and do my best. So I think that's it, everyone. We could go on and on and on. There's so many stories, but I know we're going to open it up to questions and answers. And so appreciate having this opportunity to share. And may I please honor all the people who I've invoked in this conversation. Yeah. So.
Thank you so much, Molly. How beautiful. It's so great to get a glimpse into the wide-ranging communities that you've worked with and just a little glimpse into your lessons along the way. We are so happy we have a little more time. We have about 50 minutes left with you, so we still get to dive in to some Q&A and hear a little bit more. And so I think Janet will lead us in some questions. And if any of you have a question you would like to ask Molly, please do share it. You can submit it through the live stream form if you're listening on the live stream, or you can send it in the chat window here if you're on the Zoom call. So over to you, Janet.
Thank you so much, Audrey. And oh, Molly, what an amazing thing to be able to, what an honor to witness some of your creations and to hear you share from your heart. I so am grateful for this.
Thanks, Janet.
So we formulated some questions after talking with you last week, and I would just love to, Audrey, do we have time for them all?
Probably not. So I would just pick a few, yeah.
Okay. All right. So your career began as a climate activist and experiential educator without as much inner orientation. Well, I know early on you did have an inner orientation, and then when you went out to work in the world, it became outwardly focused. Today, much of your work invites mindfulness and contemplative practice and a holistic worldview. What sparked that shift from externally oriented social justice to a quieter, embodied leadership?
Thank you, Janet. I think young, I did have a sort of mystical orientation, I would say, you know, but I was also very, in my 20s, I was very, very, very frustrated and was doing a lot of activism work. And I noticed that I was basically coming from a place of judgment. Along the lines, I think it was really when I started getting ill myself, because there was an inner fragmentation in me. There was something that I was not able to integrate within my own heart. So I was constantly pushing it away. And also, I mentioned it before, able to give the same tenderness that I was giving other people. I mean, I just didn't. I was just on the path of never work harder, learn it, and not out there, you know. So I think it just, I was hurting and I got ill. The first time I got ill it was after, and I didn't know how to integrate or process the pain. Oh, am I still cutting out, Audrey? A bit? I don't know what
You're
to
cutting
do
out
about-
a little bit. It's kind of in and out. But now, right now, it feels fine. But maybe if you just turn off your video, okay, I'll let
Sure.
you know. Maybe you can turn off your video if it continues.
Okay,
But I think right now it's fine. All of a sudden.
There might be winds
Thank you,
outside.
Molly.
So anyway, I think that's all I want to just say is just the process of maybe more authentic integration inside. And what I say is, I had to become the things I was putting away. I had to become them.
That's
Autonomous
really
pain.
wise. There's an
I don't know.
intergenerational quality to your work. And one thing you mentioned earlier this week when we spoke was that all of your projects are intergenerational. How have you integrated young and old people coming together? You said it's a conversation between the future and the past through the now. Can you speak more about that?
Yes, I think that people speak about intergenerational work in a kind of light way sometimes, like, oh, it just feels good or it's nice, but I think it's profoundly part of a healing process. It's also just natural in terms of us being part of the earth. You know, I think there's not a real health that can come from us not being in true and deep relationship with the planet and all species and the cycles of the earth. And part of that is the past and the present all coming through the now, the cycles, the seasons, the importance of all of those. So it's a little thin how I'm answering. But what I want to say is that there's just something very real and deep and true when young people and elders come together, or people of all ages, and create together, listen together, and co-mentor each other. I always say, as I move into eldership, every elder needs to be mentored by a young person right now because the worlds are so different. Just like they need us, we need each other so much, so much. And, you know, there's people on this call who have been doing this for years and years and years. And I stand by this.
Sorry to jump in. Is there like maybe just an example of how you've seen that conversation unfold, that conversation between the future and the past through the now?
Yes, I mean, I think this may be a little far out, but I kind of think our whatever the future is, you know, I just know that it can be quite limited by what we think is possible or feel is possible. And so the stories that we tell ourselves, and there's something when happens, I've seen this at nursing homes a lot when we bring young people in to do story gathering with the elders and the exchange happens, you know, at a table. It's almost like the young people are, it's like their sense of the future is changing by their experience of the elders, not just the words, the feeling. Then also they become like advocates, sometimes advocates for what we think of as disability, like they're sitting with somebody in a wheelchair or who's drooling, or, you know, something, and that changes everything too. It's just the field changes, if that makes sense, and the possibility changes, and there's healing that happens in all directions. That's how I see it, Audrey. I know it's probably a little abstract, but it really, I see it all the time.
Thank you, Molly. I wonder if part of that is that we don't have the extended family that we used to have, and that the nuclear family has created a lack of that kind of integration.
Janet, I really appreciate that very, very much, because one of the things I feel like I'm constantly involved in is, I call it decolonizing care, but we are seeing the emergence of new kinds of care structures, communities, and processes, just like this, just like Squarespace. That living and dying pod, only a week or 10 days? I don't even know. It was so deep, and such connection happening, and we're seeing it on the ground too, all over the place. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, the nuclear family, that's just a kind of a sad idea. It doesn't really work out for this kind of thing. It doesn't work so well.
You've shared a little bit about your near-death experiences, and that they've really deeply informed your lens of reality and life. How have your deep experiences with impermanence and death helped you make sense of life?
Ooh.
No small question.
Janet, what? That is quite a question there, girl. Okay. Oh my gosh. Oh. Well, in the living and dying pod, I was saying that I had an early trust in impermanence. I had to go backwards. Like, I found a way to hide from life, from showing up in life a little bit, with a kind of really broad, deep sense of compassion for everything, not wanting anything too much from life, like just being that like servant, not grasping anything. And then I had this daughter, like, and I've always considered like the simple acts. One thing I like about service space is like there's an emphasis on small acts, and I really love that. And I think that's one of the greatest honors in life. And so I think for impermanence, for me, it's like it all happens in different ways, Janet, at once. It's not a simple linear thing. It's like, I think maybe many of us can relate to it. It's like there's certain places where I'm just amazed at how hard it's been to let go. And I've just had to go down on my belly on the ground, crying, not even wanting to be in my body anymore because of pain, or, to even pierce my grasping. Mm-hmm. And then I had to also let that experience breathe and live too. Like, it sucks to be in pain all the time. Like, it's really hard to want to do anything or even have a personality, much less like relate to people, And so, all of that at once, how to let all of it breathe. And I think that's the thing I would just say is that's kind of what I came down to, is just sort of like, let the heartbreak open again and again and again. Feel all the feels. Keep letting go. Let it all be. Let it all be.
That's beautiful.
And you guys, I don't know. What do you have out there? That's what I got. Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like you came back to loving kindness for yourself, and how important that is to bring out into the world, and to have the world respond to you to create what you've been able to create.
I think so, and I think it's kind of a little bit. I really think, like, in terms of talking about coherence and integrity, I said this on the pod too. Two hands, one gives and receives. Reciprocity. This is an indigenous teaching across the globe. Reciprocity, to realize that in the body, in our relationships, it's hard in hospice to care for people who aren't willing to be vulnerable. If I am not willing to be vulnerable with myself and tender and loving with myself, how's that really going to work out? And so I'm asking other people to do that, but I'm not willing. I don't know. Not so sure. It can look nice on the outside, but it doesn't hold together. So, it has been hard. And what I found is that many of us, and me too, was just harboring, deep programming on the inside that this is not enough, man. This is like, not quite. And so we all have to work on that. I'm sorry it's called self-care sometimes, because it's deeper than that. It's deeper than self-care. This is like care. It's like we're a garden together,
Yes.
So
Beautiful. Thank you. We talked a little bit about regeneration versus burnout. Sitting beside the ill people and dying people can tax one's emotions. And also, as a caretaking professional, it's common, thank you, to encounter burnout. How can you learn to tap into regenerative giving versus a one-way giving that burns you out? What advice do you have for caretakers among us?
Absolutely. Well, I think I've touched on a little bit of it, but I do think that anybody who's very deeply service oriented, working with empathy on and in very embodied ways and relational ways, I always say a good boundary is no is an act of generosity. It
Wow.
really is. You know where somebody is. It's incredible act of generosity. No, nope, nope, nope. Just practice that one. Nope, nope, nope. So the practice of no, I'm all for that. I'm not always great at it, but I'm all for it. And I think, as I mentioned, like I talk about inner sovereignty and inner foundation quite a lot when I work with people, particularly in these very uncertain times. What is security anyway? It's very difficult to know. But I think taking responsibility for that as much as I can within myself has made a big, big difference, because I can now say, like, oh, that I can be much more honest about something like that situation right there. It's like I really do want to be there next to that person, and there's these other things going on that make it really hard. So being very honest. I know honesty is a moving target, but I really think like there's no healing without honesty. I just not really deep healing. So I have definitely burnt out. I didn't want to do any of this. I learned bike mechanics recently because I wanted to do something really concrete and a climate change barter skill. So you guys can all bring me your bikes. I'm gonna like be really good soon. But it was
I
just
love
like
that.
yeah, just learning something. I'm like, oh my God, this is not an endless human need that's never gonna go away. Like, here's your bike. It's good. You
I
know,
love
so
that.
yeah, I
Saying
don't know.
no, saying
Mhm.
no, and then having some concrete things that you do where you don't have to engage your heart and your brain. You can just
Yeah.
do these
And
simple.
And I spend tons of time in nature. You know, I'm a nature girl, and I know a lot of us here are, but wow, I don't know any other better medicine. Yeah.
Mhm. So
These are
we
my
want to
things.
talk. I'm sorry, I missed that.
I just wanted to say everybody has their own different recipe box, but I encourage everybody to walk that talk, do it.
We wanted to talk a little bit about music and creativity.
Mm.
You're an established community leader and artistic director, and you've worked for 3 decades with that. And you've worked with an array of communities around the world, from world-class universities to tiny unknown towns, from young students to senior citizens, just days before their passing. As a result of this, you often serve as a mentor and get invited to support people in their creative projects. From your lens, what are common challenges involved in bringing a creative expression into the world, and what advice do you have to address those challenges?
Oh my God, I love this question. This is a topic very near and dear to my heart, Janet. So I find that many, many people have beautiful creative things they want to realize in the world. And I think one of the problems that happens at least in the United States, I know it's different in different places, but people get very focused on making a living doing it, or, you know, how to make it large, big scale, that kind of thing. I hear it a lot. Um, and I am a big fan of one step. I mean, it's just gonna sound contradictory, but when I mentor people around this, first of all, just to get the river flowing, you know, whatever that is. Like if you if you want to start experimenting with writing music with people who are dying, maybe just go down to the nursing home and volunteer and, contact me and come up with a few ideas and just get that river flowing, because you're going to learn so much just by doing it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. So that's one of the first things I think. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have that perfect writing spot to start writing. Nope, you can do it on the toilet if you want. I mean, that is kind of extreme, but I'm just saying that I'm sort of extreme. But sometimes. But it just I think you can do that anywhere. And so there's that. And then you have to learn to weather the doubt, and fall on the ground and get back up again. That's a lot of what I spend my time doing. Do you know how many times I've fallen on the ground or had people say I have no idea what you're talking about, or, that didn't really work out, or I'm mad at you all the time. Yeah. And I just try to learn and be accountable and have people with me who help me be accountable. And so, yeah, maybe get a few people to help you out and be like, this is what I want to do. And you don't need to be perfect. It is a beautiful gift to open up these spaces, even if it's small. And then if you want to talk about actually creating a project, there's a lot of work to do to what I call creating the energetic foundation of it, to really look at it honestly. Well, what's the impact you want to have, really? What are you, and those are just I don't know, questions to help you flesh it out. But you are perfect to bring that forward. And my God, the world needs it. Lord. I mean, and I'm going to go back to creatorship. If you're talking about working with creativity and the language, what I call the language of the soul, and soul care work, please do it. Please, whatever small thing you've got going on, please do it.
I'm thinking about that last song that you shared with the woman who had suffered so much with her partner and drug addiction, and just what a beautiful expression of healing that song was.
Yeah.
And look forward to the end result too. Go ahead.
Oh my God, wait till you hear the song. We recorded all the instruments yesterday. Oh, I can't wait to send it to you guys. Yeah, it's so beautiful. And she is, and she's so clear, and it's helping her. It's that thing of finding meaning in suffering. She is just you know what she did? She started a Facebook group, a whole community in this rural community called Benzie Against Drug Dealers. So she was like, you know what? I'm just going right to the mouth of the river. I'm going to, we are going to put an end to these drug dealers. And I was like, oh my God, that is the clearest thing. That is the sword of Kali right there. I was, and she's doing it. She's doing it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll make this the last question.
And then we'll go into Q&A. We'll invite questions from others.
Right. Sorry, that's, yeah. One element of your work is that you often enter communities struggling with grief and illness, trauma, and pain. And you've worked with communities as a young person with nursing home residents, a foreigner in West Africa, a new person in a small border town in New Mexico. As a community organizer, your work is very participatory. How do you enter a community and lead an effort while ensuring that it's coming from the people themselves? How do you lead from the back of the room, which enables you to see without the filters of your own intentions or project vision?
Love these questions. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. These are things I just never get to talk about. Oh my God. That is such a big part of this work. So, being an outsider in small communities or traumatized communities, let's take Cuba, New Mexico. 3-year project there called Common Ground, mostly Navajo, Diné communities, Latino communities, white ranching communities, kind of called a checkerboard of New Mexico, with a lot of racial trauma and economic inequity, intense. And so I was commissioned to do a 3-year project there. And so the first thing we did, my collaborator and dear friend David Gallegos and I just started with meeting people and listening. So I am a true believer in authentic relationships and that they take time. And if somebody's sitting in a room saying they have answers for some group of people that they don't know, like, So, or if you've got a board that doesn't represent the people whom you're serving, not so much, you know. I'm sorry, I'm being a little harsh, but not so much. So I think, you know, these things take time. So I'd rather see people scale back and just, you know, listen to one another and be honest. So I haven't tried to be somebody I'm not. You know, I try very directly to speak to my history, my privilege, my perspectives, and trust goes at the speed of trust. So trying to pretend that we trust each other when we don't is just, I think it's not a great idea. I don't think it leads to cool things, good things. I just don't. And I've been in many situations where people are telling me I need to trust everything and it's all sacred and everything, and it's not yet for me. It turns out it's not. So I don't really appreciate that, and I won't ask that of other people. But I do stand by that it is okay to have an open heart and to ask a question and to be an outsider and to be a fool. It's okay. And I like the idea of the wise fool. Like, people tell me all the time, you can't do these projects. They always say, like, you can't do that. I'm like, they told me nobody was going to come in Cuba. Even up here on this project, they were like, how are you going to get people? And I was like, get people? That's so transactional. Like, I don't know. Here's some donuts. I mean, I don't know. Like, what do you mean? Like, I think it's about meeting each other and being real with each other. And I think people want to come forward. We want to break the isolation of mental health up here. It's deeply painful to be so stigmatized for something that most everybody's going through right now.
Thank you so much, Molly. Yeah, that's beautiful. I really bow before your humble heart. I see the truth in your being.
Oh, thanks, Janet. Oh my gosh.
And now, Audrey, I think you wanted to create the
Yeah.
transition to other people's questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Molly. I really do feel like we're like sitting around a fire, getting to hear, just from your heart, your genuine reflections on so many elements of your life, which has been so colorful and full on so many levels. So we do want to give a chance for those who have questions for you to ask them. So just as a reminder, if you have any questions and you're listening in, you can submit it through the live stream. Or if you're on the Zoom call here, you can just send it in our chat window. So I think the first person is Susan. So we're going to go over to you, Susan, to ask your question.
Molly, I'm brimming with gratitude that you have given voice and beauty to the invisible work of connective tissue and cultivating that. And my work is also on helping communities cultivate more connective tissue, but I've used less arts and aiming more that way. And the thing that I'm very curious about is when you're working with a specific community, have you done work where it's not just, helping people get past their own individual pain, but that a community can address its own possibility of changing its narrative, the story of me, the story of us, the story of now, and how, what can you tell us or point us to about helping a legit, authentic cross-section of a community coming up with a new narrative about themselves?
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan, and thank you for your work. I look forward to hearing more about it. I will say, I think there's a danger in only focusing on the personal in any of these situations. I think it's one of my big kind of issues around the mindfulness industry, actually, is the lack of looking at the systems that influence everything. And so I just want to say, in general, I kind of have my eye on both of those things all of the time. Some projects have more of a opportunity to kind of focus on that than others. For example, working in a specific nursing home, or care center or hospice, you can imagine like some of that can get in there, and is part of certainly of the group work, of the sessions. It comes out even in the songs, and then how the songs are presented and worked with. So there's that. Back to and some many smaller projects I've done with like rehab centers and stuff like that. Now is for sure has looking at systematic, just let's just talk about
Sorry,
that.
Molly, can you just repeat the last couple sentences? I think the audio cut out.
Generational poverty and economic is a thing up here, and how that relates to drug addiction. Opioid addiction is very, 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 very common up here. So I just want to say, Susan, I don't know quite a very specific example, but I just want to thank you for bringing it up. The two are inextricably linked to me, and it is the framework of liberation that I hold in my heart, and that isn't like one kind of liberation versus another. It's all of it integrated. So
Thank you very much.
thank you, Susan. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go to Sister Elizabeth next to ask her question.
Molly, I just love you. I just, it's all.
Oh.
I'm just, yeah. I as you were speaking, I was thinking about you've been talking a lot about the sense of impermanence, right? Just that sense of nothing lasting forever and having to face those endings. But you also mentioned the process through which we believe in one song, right? We believe that one song is being sung through our lives, and yet that facing impermanence, the true song, right? What we discover to be the emerging truth comes forward. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little about your own experience of watching that powerful experience, and how, just as you were speaking about the sense of not always the personal, but it's the systemic as well. I think sometimes maybe in that emerging truth, the systemic brokenness emerges, because my song is personally mine, but it's also the song of humanity, And so just wondering how you can talk a little bit about that.
Wow, well, you spoke very beautifully about it, Sister Elizabeth. You know, I guess I'll just try to add to what I feel in what you're asking. I feel like there's something in this journey of mine where, just working with people and communities, and also in my own journey of how to discern what is truthful and what's real. And again, I'm going to go back to that static thing of like the stories that are embedded in us, the isolation, the places we get rutted internally and culturally from turning away from I wouldn't say truthful narratives, but it just feels to me like it takes a multi layered approach, a kind of comprehensive approach to clearing that static. And as I said, like one of the best ways I know to do that is to actually lean into it. And we see that with like somatic traumatic work, trauma work too, to let something actually get bigger before it can change. And, you know, in this work, sometimes people want to express really rough stuff. Like, I've had a lot of kids want to play death metal music. Okay. Now you guys might go, that's not spiritual, like death metal, you know, like they're screaming. It's totally fabulous because they are expressing something that is in their hearts, and that then allows something to shift. There was a guy named Aaron on the Common Ground Project who was diagnosed as schizophrenic, young teenager, Diné, Navajo man. His family was gone. He lived like in a ravine. And he came to us and he was like, I want to make a video about gangs. And I was like, okay, like I'm not really into gangs. I don't think they're great, but okay, let's make a video about gangs. And we happen to have a filmmaker who made a video about gangs with Aaron. But in the middle of it, what happened? It's like an Aikido move. Like this other narrative shaped up, and Aaron became somebody who thought of himself as somebody who's breaking the cycle of violence by the end. He stood on the stage and said, we can break this cycle of violence. That guy. And so I think there's just something about the evolution that is so, like, it comes in different ways to me, to different people in different communities. I think I'm not answering your question. I'm just sharing what I've noticed. Is that helpful at all? I need to think
You
about
are
it.
definitely answering my question. Yeah.
Okay. I need to
Yeah,
think
it's very
about this.
I just realized in the little reaction button on Zoom, there aren't enough emojis for me to put up while you were speaking, you know, what I really wanted to say. And but you got it. I think that last example was exactly it, is that the power of the emergence in the person, which is not just, it's a power within themselves and a power that's being given as gift to a community that doesn't always see itself as broken or you know, so
And
yeah. So thank you. I know we don't have much time.
well, I just wanted to say, and by going into that brokenness, we find that seed of resilience and beauty and power, and that people can express it in their unique ways. That's what I like about the arts. Like, you're not being told how you have to express it. And I think that's very, very critical.
That's a great question. Kind of piggybacking off of that, another question that had come in is a bit about that delicateness at, that brokenness, and especially around death. And, for people who are dying, it's a very, especially if it's not a sudden death, oftentimes at the end of life, it's, you're really weak, you're very vulnerable. And so this question came in, is it hard for you to see people dying? Is it hard for people to see themselves in their last days? What do you sense in the air when you sit with the dying?
Well, that's a really great question. I find it very diverse. I mean, I will just say I don't know about any of you all who work with dying people out there. I find that it can be just incredibly diverse how somebody is opening to their dying process or not. I generally find it a very sacred time. I have seen people who have gone through lives holding on, clutching to different things at the very last minutes, just letting go of things, and, the veil lifts and we get to all be together in that space. What an honor. What an honor. Because I don't see the death as an ending. That's just not my experience. But often there is a tremendous amount of grief, around death and dying, almost always. For me too. And I will say it was very different for me with family members than, it's like I was always said, like, working with people with cancer and cancer treatment centers. And then I had a serious cancer and I was like, okay, that's really different than what I thought it was, and it's the same thing with family members, sitting with my beloved, one of my fathers dying. different than sitting at somebody who I've just known only a month or something. I wish I could say it was the same. So yeah, I do think it's different. And, you know, people say you die how you live. Well, I don't know. I think possibly, I think the people who are more able to be vulnerable and more have a spiritual foundation just find it much easier than those who don't have that. And there's plenty that I've been with who don't. They really don't have that feeling. So that's hard. That's a harder
Right.
situation when you're somebody who's just suffering and they're just going to go through that door, you know, really resisting. That's hard.
Is there a particularly memorable time when you like a person that you sat beside their bed, or even in your own experience? Maybe a story that comes to mind.
Yes, there was a man that was part of the Life Songs project, and he, you know, he had addiction till the very end, and you know what he wanted to write about was just partying, really, you know, and riding a donkey through town, and you know, had a family of kids who loved him but didn't know how to be close to him, and it was painful, you know, to be in acceptance of that too. Acceptance of that too. And he wanted to write a song about drinking and being a barber and riding a donkey. And that was his life song. So can you see what I mean? It's a little bit, it was like, okay, that's where we are. I can't change this. I tried to, to offer some other potential directions. And he just, you know, he went out, I think, just without much sense of connection. Yeah.
And how do
That
you
happens.
process that?
I got sad, and then I have had to learn to become really spacious. Just be very, very spacious and stay connected to, you know, the bigger story, the bigger mystery that I can't know all the answers to. We can know, I just think we all have pieces of it. So, you know, I'm listening. I listen. All of this work is based on listening. So I'm listening to myself, I'm listening to the world, I'm listening to that man, and I'm breathing it and feeling it and integrating it, and then doing whatever the next best thing is to do. Go eat a chocolate ice cream cone, look at a tree. I don't know, pet my dog. Give thanks, back, you know, give thanks, let go, give thanks, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, one of the comments that had come in on the live stream is from someone. He said, I'm 65, I'm bipolar. I've been asking for healing from depths of depression, which for over 35 years has created a kind of blockage that waxes and wanes. On the left side of my face, it drains me of creative energy and of life. So I'm very, and he said, I'm gratitude for this gathering.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you know, one thing I just want to say into that is so many of us are impacted by so much is impacting us. And I don't know how much expression, you know, some of us have some venues of expression and witness expressions, and some of us don't. And I'm not trying to answer that situation or anything in that beautiful sharing, but it reminds me how important it is to express, to find venues of expression so that it doesn't just tank, you know, like well up in us. So I'm just thinking of that, how important that is to me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Molly. We'll go to Sigurd next to ask the next question.
Oh, great.
I'm so glad I'm here in this talk.
Oh.
I didn't know it was going to come like that. When you were summarizing, you used the word gravitational. I think it was in respect to how you present yourself with other people, but I'd like to hear more about that.
Oh, thank you, Sigurd. Thank you for being with us. And yeah. Um, so gravitational it's an important word to me, and it came from it wasn't a mentor. He didn't say this to me, but Anthony Braxton was one of my musical mentors. He's a very expansive composer, Anthony Braxton. I call him as somebody who makes maps to other universes and brings them in here. His music is almost impossible to play, like literally, and he likes that. So you disassemble while you're playing his music. But when I first met him, Sigurd, he said to me, Miss Sturgis, please tell me about your music. And I have imposter syndrome all the time because I'm not like a prodigy or anything. And so I always feel like I'm just like, I don't know, like, like I've got it. But he was sitting with me, and his question made me so nervous. But he was asking me something of, he wanted me to respond like with my being. And I had nothing to say to him really at that time, but I left his office. This was when I was like 30. And I was like, what is he really asking me? And the words said, make of yourself a center of gravity. Make of yourself a center of gravity. And I took that as like, how do I rest in myself? If I'm resting in myself, somebody will know where to find me. They'll know how to feel me. If I'm not leaning out too much and into all the time and just like trying to do this, that's how I socialized. Like, oh, here, let me rearrange this. And not that I don't do that, but it's more like I learned to kind of root myself like a tree. Particularly when I'm asking people to do things that are clearly going to be uncomfortable for them. Like, people will do a lot of things with me, mainly because I'm like, because I'm like, can you help me? And I mean it. I kind of mean it. To truth, I mean it. I'm not faking it. It's like I do need that help, but that's where the gravitation comes from. So I think it comes to do with like trusting myself, resting in myself, and not having to push so much away. So I've learned to do that over time. Not to have to push things or not to fight the world. I do fight the world in different ways, but I don't fight it in that foundational way. Does that make sense at all?
Really appreciate your reply. Yes.
Hey, thank you for asking it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm mindful we just have a few minutes remaining and maybe a couple last questions. Sorry, we won't be able to get to everybody's questions, but just a couple last ones here is, one is how, in a way, the idea for this session was exploring how you've learned love and, out of all the ways we could choose to live our lives, living with love is a beautiful one, but also a very difficult one sometimes, especially when you've encountered a lot of different things in life. And so maybe from you, and it's very inspiring to me to see how over all the decades, and all the work you've done, you could easily get jaded, but, or you could easily get defeated, having cancer, having this loss and that, but how has growing in love changed your life, and how have you committed to that?
Thank you. Well, Audrey, I want to say only a year ago, I I don't know that I was jaded. I did not know if I wanted to be in my body anymore. And that is not to say I was suicidal. I was in so much physical pain, and I was tired, and it was COVID, and I was away from, like, my daughter had gone to college, and I was more isolated, like many of us, than I had been in a long time. And I kind of was at I didn't quite understand, in some sense, the importance of, I have practices, but I didn't feel like I had like a sangha or religion or a practice. Like, I was without structures, actually, to help me. And it was a really important time because I had to go deep, deep inside my heart and make the decision to be here in a new way. Like, we often have to make decisions again and again, right? In different ways, right? I had to make it again to be here. And I only bring that up to say, it hasn't been like one, "Ooh, wow, I got this down." It was like falling, having that opportunity to go to the center of the temple of the heart. And that decision was a whisper. It wasn't anything big. It was nothing. It was a tiny little whisper, of Molly, you can do this, I'm going to make this decision to be here again. And I don't know what that means. I don't really have a career orientation. I know it's been a body of work that is linked together, but it's never been my orientation. My orientation is, for lack of a better word, is, love and action, or communion with God or source or energy. That's my orientation. But I have found, like, I have no fancy words for it. There's nothing that's really like, there's nothing simple. People have all these like books of like the 5 steps to know God, or the 5 things you can like. Mine is so much more like, and ooh, like, yeah. So I just want to say, yeah, thank you for asking that. And I just always come back to the heart. That is my orientation. In even this gathering, to just, to acknowledge and take this moment to really connect with each other through our hearts. I think this is the deep medicine for me, and it is the reason I want to be here. It is the reason I want. It's
Thank
the
you,
medicine of
Molly.
Mhm.
It's just your authenticity in sharing this. It's very powerful to me. And I know in a pre-conversation, a few of us had the gift to hear a bit more about your experiences. And I think one thing that really struck me, because I know when you say, like, when you mentioned whether or not I wanted to be here, I know you've actually gone, like you've actually like died and come back in a way. And that is quite a powerful experience. And I don't know if you want to speak anything on that. I know we just have 1 minute left, but is there anything that comes up for you? I think one thing that really struck me was that you had said, having gone and come back, there is a space of no suffering that you experience, and you actively chose to come back to the suffering in this world. And I don't know if you have anything you want to say about that.
Yeah,
I hope it's okay to bring it up.
Totally fine. No, it's totally fine to bring that up. And I think you said it. I did experience the end of suffering. And so to be here with consciousness, more and more I have an experience of kind of, I don't know how many of you guys have this, but just sort of multiple experiences at once. One being a place of suffering and also the place of stillness and wholeness where there isn't suffering. In some ways it's more integrated now for me, which is a relief because suffering's tiring. And I also just respect it, that it's there until it's not there anymore too. And that there's an invitation in that. So I think I respect being here and that experience of what creates the suffering, and it become more spacious. But I will say, Audrey, for sure, my experience is that at the deepest level is the silence from which emerges the beautiful music that we all are. That's why I stay so close to music, that we each are, and just feeling it through my heart. It's really kind of simple, it moves in the way that it wants to, and then I show up the best I can in this body person, doing my best. So yeah, I think that's it. It is a constant meditation. I think people who have had dying experiences it's kind of a constant experience for me that
Right.
I'm always learning about. Yeah, I'm always learning about.
Yeah. I don't know. I know we're over now, but for the people on this call, do you want to share anything about just contextually about that experience of like what happened or?
Yeah, well, sure. For anybody who wants to stay, I lost over half my blood. I had a home birth, and the midwives did not catch what was going on, and so ended up being very extreme. And I had the experience of my senses leaving one by one, which I later found out is well documented in the Upanishads, actually. Sound being the last one. And my experience was simply kind of moving, and it happens a lot. I learned too later that people who lose blood, there's often a kind of feeling of almost being in a river. So yeah, for me it was just this world disappeared immediately. What we think of as this material reality just was gone, was gone. And it was like going home is sort of like the emergence into a light and a home feeling. People have this in different ways, and I definitely am not anybody to say this is what you will experience or somebody else will experience. This is just not my thing. But I experienced then just kind of about to merge and then turning around because of my daughter. And she has helped me become more human, which I really want to do. I just want to do that. So trying to do that. Thank you for helping me.
Aw, Molly, that's really beautiful. Thank you. I think we're all just trying to do that, all just trying to be a little more human, and whatever that means. Thank you.
Guys, we got this. That's what we say. We got this somehow. We're hurtling towards it.
Yeah, that's best job ever. And most challenging.
No joke. No joke.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Molly. There's so much has been unfolded in this, from the mundane to the mystical and everything in between. It's been such a gift to have a chance to sit with you in this conversation and to hear your stories and your heart talk. One final short question before we close here is that is there anything we as a community can do to be of support or service to you? There's actually a few people who had written in. One person wrote actually that they have been trying to make the Stories That Heal project. They're trying to attend it and would like to come this Tuesday. And then another person, Claire, wrote, I just want to know how as an individual I can get involved with people doing these types of projects. I don't have musical ability and I just want to be a cog, not a leader. But how can we in our own corners of the world, any of us watching this talk or listening in here, just be of support to you, or just, be of support or service in our corners of the world? Do you have any?
Oh, thank you. Well, you're certainly welcome to contact me, anybody, and I will help brainstorm where you live to see what might be there, or to support you. So my name, mollysturgis@gmail.com. You're very welcome to contact me. That's the first thing. And I think it depends how small your community is. I think most cities have lots of projects like these and different kinds. And they usually love to have people come, particularly people who are willing to kind of take the time to build the relationships. And, it's a little harder when people come in and out. Stories That Heal is built that way, but People can come and go, but yeah, so that's that. And I would just love to support you guys in doing whatever you're doing. How could you support me? I mean, the only thing I'm focused on right now is I really want to see a different designation for this kind of community soul work. I think there's a lot of people doing it. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I think young people right now need helpful it's not just identities, it's like structures of engagement with the world. And so like all these young musicians are craving to be more involved in this kind of work, or artists or dancers or poets. And so that's one of the things I'm kind of focused on, is just to how to bring that a little bit more into being. So to support some of the young people in grounding this work, because there's just so much desire, and that helpful, and them having places they can plug into meaningfully, it will helps us all navigate these hard times, as I was saying before, that we need to be able to participate meaningfully. So I'm trying to work on that. Anybody can, send me anything on that. I'm hoping to birth that in the next while.
Oh, thanks, Molly. Well, we've kept you a little over. I know you actually have something right after this. So thank you so much for staying a few minutes extra. We just wanted to close the call with a little gratitude. And also, if you still want to share any musical closing with us, you're welcome. I don't know if you have time at this point. But
I don't really have time, but I will. I just want to give a shout out to a musician named Blind Willie Johnson. He died in 1945. I don't know if any of you know him. He was a kind of a preaching man and guitarist, and a woman whose mom was involved in the civil rights movement, alerted me this song, and I'll just close with the.
Okay. But before you close, I wanted to invite Janet also to share any closing words.
Janet? Can't quite hear you. I think you're
I'm
muted.
sorry. I wanted to do the big picture of how this has impacted me, because growing up, we're taught the survival of the fittest paradigm, and it's never sat well in my heart, and it doesn't work in systems, and it's not a good worldview. And I feel like the worldview that you embody, that Service Space embodies, and that I wish the world would embody and is moving towards it, is survival of those who cooperate. And that deep love and listening and open-heartedness that will heal the world. And just thank you so much for embodying that.
Thank you, Karen. I'm Janet. Sorry. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Mom.
Yeah, so I just want to sing you out of here real quick. Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. For this whole world is healing now. Sister, don't you stop it singing, sister. Don't you stop it singing, sister. Don't you stop it singing, for this whole world is healing now. Brother, don't you stop it dancing, brother. Don't you stop it dancing, brother. Don't you stop it dancing, for this whole world is healing now. Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. For this whole world is healing now.
Oh, thank you,
Billy
Molly.
Shout out to him.
Thank you so much.
Lamp
We will-
trimmed and burning, people. Keep it burning. Yeah.
we feel it. We'll just close with a minute of silence. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, everybody, for co-creating this space.
Thank you. Thank you, Service Space. Thank you all for being here.